Good afternoon to you. 406 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Daniel Turner joins us from Power of the Future. That's at 4:30. We'll talk to him about good questions for getting American energy up and running. At tonight's debate, we'll see what the candidates have to say on that subject. And Dr. Kevin Roberts is here at 5 o'clock. He's the president of the Heritage Foundation, our friend, host of the Kevin Roberts Show. And we'll talk to him about why the Heritage Foundation is now opposing Joe Biden's plans to send $24 billion more American dollars to Ukraine. That conversation ahead. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Are you noticing the headlines on COVID? The resurgence of COVID, and with it, the return of, in some cases, or the continuance of, in other cases. Did you know Georgetown still has a mask mandate going on? Georgetown University. Did you know about that? They're still forcing people. This is so stupid, to wear things that don't do anything except indicate who you voted for in the last election. That's right. That's all it does. A number of colleges and institutions now imposing mask mandates across the country. What is happening here? Phil Kerpen follows this really closely. He's the president of American Commitment, and he joins us now. Phil, good to have you back with us, sir.
Oh, my pleasure, Vince. You know what's happening? I figured it out. COVID is back because the very dangerous Novak Djokovic was allowed into the country.
Yeah, he brought it with him, and now we have to fight it again. That's the issue. Because it's funny you say that, because it kind of felt like to me that they're trying to create the same circumstances that got Joe Biden into office in the first place.
Well, I actually, I never put any stupidity past the media and the left and the Democrats, so maybe they are trying to bring it all back. But I tend to think that they're smart enough to know that if the election's about COVID, they're going to lose. And so I don't think they want to bring it back. And I even though I would enjoy them suffering the political consequences of it, I hope they don't bring it all back, because it was such a disaster, especially for the children. And so I'm sort of skeptical that it's really all coming back. But, one of the problems is that they were never forced to admit they were wrong about any of it, about the lockdowns, about the masks, about the school closures, really any of it. And so you're going to have these individual instances, localities and institutions that are kind of not in on the joke, that it was all a waste of time and didn't accomplish anything. And that's where they're going to start bringing these things back in sort of, individual isolated places, because there's never been any accountability. And so you see things like Lionsgate films, and there's a college in Georgia that brought back just for 2 weeks to prevent another pandemic. Because masking on a campus in Georgia, that's going to prevent a global pandemic.
Where have I heard that before? 2 weeks to slow the spread. Where's that?
Right. Well, that was 15 days. This is only 14, so it's totally different than the other one. It will definitely work this time. No, but I mean, we just had, I don't know if you saw the last week, Fauci gave a talk that's on YouTube, and Jordan Schachtel clips of it that were circulating the last couple. He said, oh, we absolutely had to lock down. Lockdowns were great because it gave us more time to build more ventilators. And I'm like, Fauci's already admitted that the ventilators killed people who probably otherwise would have lived, and now, he's just pretend I never said that. Really, we had to lock down to build more ventilators.
And didn't he also say that I never told anybody to lock down? I thought that was another talking point of his. He's all over the place.
We never had lockdowns. He never told anyone to lock down, and also he was right to lock us down.
And the lockdowns were great. It's amazing. It really is. Okay, so you mentioned there's a couple of universities, Rutgers, Georgetown, still requiring these useless masking and vaccines to this very date. Atlanta Area College, Morris Brown College is now reinstating COVID mask mandates, they say, for 14 days. Lionsgate, the Hollywood movie studio, is bringing back mask mandates amid a spike in COVID cases. And also I should have also mentioned that at that Atlanta school, Morris Brown College, they're not just bringing back masks. They're doing the whole thing. They're doing physical distancing. They're doing social tracking. If you come into contact with someone.
Contact tracing. Yes, the contact trace, everything.
Here's the thing. The people who called for all that stuff never admitted they were wrong. So if you're the head of that college, wherever it is, and you're just, hey, the experts told me to do this stuff, now that's why, until they admit that it was all wrong, we're going to continue to see these recurrences. And by the way, as is the tradition, this stuff is basically coming after the wave peaked, because there are a lot of indicators that this tiny mini wave of not very severe disease has already peaked nationally. Yeah.
And if you look at the you look at sort of the little upblip, it already looks like it's flattening out. If you look in the wastewater or in the hospital numbers, whatever you like to look at.
Right.
So, look, I don't know. I guess COVID was. I got a lot of media bookings out of it. I was on TV a lot. You have me on your show, but honestly, I'd like us all to move on.
Of
I
course.
think there are a lot of more important things happening than a virus that at this point is no more severe than any of 100 other viruses that people get and then they get over. It's really not. So the obsession should end.
Do you see the federal government doing anything related to the latest so-called surge?
Well, a lot of people ask me, are they going to bring back the mask mandate on public transportation? And, it's interesting because they got the case dismissed. The case that actually ended the public transportation airline mask mandate got dismissed in June because they said, oh, no one would ever do that again. This case is moot. And the appeals court said, okay, they threw it out. So I don't think they can turn around and bring it back a couple months after doing that. I think they would look completely ridiculous. But, when you're dealing with the left, ridiculousness is not always a bar to them doing something.
Yeah,
so
and
I don't think you can completely rule it out.
Yeah, and all those, the effect of this is it makes people into, it already did. We saw it play out in real time, and now we're seeing it in some small cases at the moment. It makes people into a neurotic mess. They're not, they're scared to death that they're going to die at any given moment, when, of course, they're not going to. The whole thing is absurd. I saw a guy today. I was in Washington, D.C., walking to the studio, a guy by himself in his car wearing a surgical mask, and he blew the stop sign. I was like,
that reminds me of the famous paper. You remember the one a couple years ago, the paper on Stanford's campus that there were more people riding bicycles around the campus with no helmet but with a mask.
Yes.
Than there were. That's what that reminds me of.
It's insane. The guy moved. He didn't even slow. His brake lights never appeared. He just rolled right through the stop sign. He had a mask on in his car. And I'm saying, what the hell's happening here? So these masks, just to reiterate,
by the way, the masks can inhibit your field of vision. So I frequently have noticed that the people who drive very badly, you look at them and that's all they have a mask on. It's maybe not a coincidence.
Yeah, it slows down the amount of oxygen getting to your brain. It all adds up. So here's one other piece of this. The masks, for the 10,000th time, don't actually do anything. Do I have that right?
There are about 1 million studies. The effect is somewhere between nothing at all and something like irrelevantly small, but it's pretty close to nothing.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So as you measure it right now, some optimism in our conversation. You don't think that there's a full-scale resurgence of COVID tyranny coming up?
I really don't. The thing is, you look at the hospital. They can play games with these charts, and if you only show the past couple of months, it can look like some of these charts are rising. But you put it in the context of where we've been, and we're still talking about teeny tiny numbers, and the severity is not there. People are not getting severely ill with COVID. They're just not, because everyone's had it before, for the most part. And it's the first time that you get it the worst, almost always. And so I don't see this. I don't see the panic. Now, to the point that you made, though, about people being sort of on edge with seeing these incidents, these places where they are bringing stuff back, that is a kind of tyranny over the normal people, too. The idea that at any moment the place where you work might put a mandate back in, or, the place where you go to school might put something on your kids or whatever. So I think it's going to stay sporadic. I don't think we're going to see national or statewide orders or anything like that again. But even with it being sporadic, that can be psychologically harmful, not just to the people subjected to it, but to anyone else who thinks they might be. And so I would hope we could put it all to rest. And,
right.
I think the states that actually banned this stuff, and and they were saying, why are you banning mask mandates? No one's ever going to do it. Well, if you live in Florida, you don't have to worry about it. You got a law; it's not coming back. So I do think maybe some places where Republicans have unified control, they might put some laws on the books just so people never have to worry about that stuff.
I will say that, I know you want to get past talking about this as an issue, and I do too, but there is an upside in talking about it in terms of just mocking the people who still take it seriously and shaming them. If we can do that, you can prevent your stupid organization from adopting these policies. If you make it cartoonish to adopt them, then maybe you could decrease the chances it occurs in the place in which you work or play.
Yeah, a little good-natured ridicule doesn't hurt. I agree with that.
Okay, good. All right. Well, Phil Kerpen, thank you as always. Really appreciate your assessment on everything.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. That's Phil Kerpen, president of American Commitment, keeping an eye on the COVID tyranny. Although I will say that you never can put it past the left to even use the non-existence, which of course they did in to great extent in 2020, the non-existence of a meaningful threat to you and your family as a basis to take power from you anyway, right? So it's, we can control the weather if you give us more power. The weather's going to kill you at any moment. Okay, you can have more power. Really? There's a surge in cases in Philadelphia, in where else? Detroit, in Milwaukee. So there's a surge, and it just happens to be time to the election. So people are not going to be able to go to the polls. We're just going to need 2 months of, ballot harvesting. That's the way that we're going to be able to stop COVID and make sure we, quote, defend our democracy. Not going to put that past them at all. Meanwhile, what else is going on in the world? I do have a headline here that is cracking me up. And it's real, unfortunately. The CIA has dedicated a program. It has a completely dedicated program to recruiting transgender individuals. The Central Intelligence Agency has decided that as a part of their 3-year diversity and inclusion strategy, they are recruiting transgender individuals. That's the plan. And that makes a lot of sense. I see this from the Washington Free Beacon. That makes a lot of sense because, they need people who can assume another life and stay in character for years on end to work for the CIA. So why wouldn't you go for people who are like, I'm not a man, I'm a woman. And then they stay in character. That makes a lot of sense to me, personally. All right. Hold tight. We'll jump over to traffic. I've got more for you, as always. Daniel Turner, just minutes away. We'll talk energy with him. Head to the phones. We've got Chris calling in from Thurmont right now on line 3. Chris, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. How are you doing today?
I'm good, sir.
I have 2 words for you based off what you were just talking about, the CIA's new hiring policy type thing. Sam Brinton.
The perfect candidate. Sam Brinton. Sam Brinton says that he's non-binary or something. He's just kind of like, he's a bizarro Matt Damon. That's what he looks like. And he steals women's clothes and he wears them.
Yes. And hey, if that's the best qualified person for the job, God bless him. But I'm sorry, I want somebody that does their job, not steal other people's luggage.
True. And honestly, Chris, if we're assessing Sam Brinton, if we're going to score him, or it or her or Z or whatever it is, we have to acknowledge that he's only halfway there because while he can adopt a character and a life entirely and fully commit to the character, he doesn't have enough discretion. He got caught. He's not going to make a good CIA guy because we caught him on camera stealing the luggage. He's not going to do it. So China
and Russia would have a field day with him.
Yeah. We'll see. Thank you, Chris. It's amazing. By the way, I do want to offer a correction on the CIA story. It's actually more developed than I realized. The CIA started looking for transgender applicants in 2016. That's actually when this Free Beacon story is from. A friend sent it to me today. Family member sent it to me today. And it's from 2016, which means that it is now many years in development here. And I'm certain they have a very robust transgender CIA office going on here, which is nuts. It's just totally crazy. All right, I've actually got another transgender story for you coming up. Hopefully we can get to later in the program. Before we get there, Lena wants to weigh in on the COVID craziness seeming to come back on line 2. Lena in Northern Virginia. Hello, Lena.
Hello, Vince. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I think the federal government will make a bigger deal out of this COVID outbreak so that Biden can campaign from his basement.
So you do suspect that it will be used as a pretext in order to make Joe Biden, it makes sense for Joe Biden to continue to be in that basement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't put anything past them, so I'm inclined to think like you're thinking on this, Lena. Although Phil Kerpen thinks that it's gone way too far. And one point in favor of Phil's take on this is, remember, leading up to the midterms, Democrats began abandoning all of the COVID hysteria because because the American public had grown so sick of it that they were trying to escape it. And then they pretended like they were the people who were opening everything up, if you recall. So it's a bit of a coin toss right now on the way this goes.
I don't know. Biden can't put together two sentences independently, and he's going to have to do pre-recorded statements. The only way to do that is from the basement.
Yep, you got to have access to the teleprompter. You're right. Thank you, Lena. I appreciate that. Let me take Shane in St. Louis now, calling on St. Louis, line 4. Shane.
Hi, Vince. It's always so good to talk to you.
Yes, sir.
I am a truck driver. I haul hazardous material for the 3M Corporation. And today I arrived in Chicago to deliver my load, and I went in to check into the receiving, and there was a lady behind a glass window not wearing a mask, and 3 or 4 individuals with her in the same room not wearing a mask. And when I stepped up to check in, she pointed to a box of paper masks and said, "Sir, I'm going to need you to put on a mask, please." And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to do that. And she was fully ready to reject my load and not accept it, which they can't do. And to my surprise, there were 3 other drivers behind me also waiting to check in. And they said, "Well, we're not wearing a mask either, so you'll have to reject all 4 of our loads because we're just not going to do it." And then after a conversation, I suppose, with the supervisor or somebody in the upper echelon, he said, "Look, we'll let it slide today, but just so you know that when you come back, we will have a mask mandate, and you will not be able to deliver your loads unless you're wearing a mask."
This was, you said it was Chicago this occurred?
Yes, sir.
And
That's
so
right.
Chicago, and a group of people not wearing masks tell the truck drivers as they're walking in with their deliveries that you have to wear masks. Do you sense that they think that it's unique to truck drivers, that there's something wrong with truck drivers? They need to be masked up? Is that what you're hearing?
Well, I don't know if it's that or if it was just a straight-up power trip. I'm not sure what it was, but we're in trucks by ourselves. If anybody is healthy, it would be us truck drivers.
Well, I'm glad you're standing up for the rest of us. Once again, it's truck drivers doing that. Thank you, Shane. It's amazing. 2023. They've given up the ruse. They're not even wearing the masks themselves anymore. They just say, "Hey, you, I'm in charge here. Put your obedience mask on." Turns out people aren't interested in obeying anymore. How'd that happen? 429. Good afternoon to you. 435 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, the president of the Heritage Foundation will be joining us, Dr. Kevin Roberts. We'll talk to him about why his organization is now opposing, pretty publicly, the additional $24 billion that Joe Biden would like to spend in Ukraine. We'll discuss that with him at 5 o'clock, and you'll be able to join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. On that front, on Ukraine, number of stories of importance, and we'll get into them with Dr. Roberts. But we've got the headline out this afternoon that the Wagner Group leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, is apparently dead now. Remember, this is the guy who, the media was telling us, led this revolt inside of Russia. He was marching on Moscow for a time, headed towards Putin. There was this infighting going on, and then he abandoned his effort to get to Moscow. There were only very few people killed in this effort. It was also confusing and weird and bizarre, and then it just ended. And then he was, squirreled away in Belarus, they claimed at one point, and then he was releasing videos saying he's fine. And, well, they say today that a plane that he was in with 10 people inside of it, a private plane carrying him, went down. There's some on social media who are swearing that video demonstrates that the plane was shot down. Wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. It went down in Russia, and 10 people were killed in the crash. Prigozhin's name was on the flight manifest, and that's all we know. That's all we know right now. So we'll see. The reality is, all we know is that Russian state media is reporting this. You see video footage like this. They say Prigozhin was on the plane, but it seems like you have to qualify all of these things. It's just, we are told. That's what they say. That's what they claim. The Russian state media is reporting that Prigozhin was killed in the plane crash. We'll see. And then the other piece about Russia that is, I would say, important, and will come up in our conversation with Dr. Roberts, is that the stockpiles, America's stockpiles have been running very thin. The Washington Post has a piece up this week that Ukraine is flying through, by their words, Ukraine flies through artillery rounds, U.S. races to keep up. They say the Biden administration's sprint to supply Ukraine with weapons central to its military success against Russia has yielded a promising acceleration of arms production, including the standard NATO artillery round, output of which is expected soon to reach double its pre-war U.S. rate of 14,000 a month. The stakes in the U.S. effort to shake up a sclerotic defense acquisition system are particularly high as Kiev tries to claw back territory from Russian control in a slow-moving counteroffensive whose fate, U.S. officials now say, hinges on the West's ability to satisfy Ukraine's astonishing hunger for artillery ammunition. But industry experts, that is people who stand to make a lot of money from all of this, warn of major challenges in sustaining an elevated output of arms and equipment needed not just to aid Ukraine, but to ensure the United States' own security in potential conflicts with Russia or China. That includes overcoming scarcity of key inputs, including TNT, and maintaining expanded capacity amid fluctuating budgets and uncertainty about future military needs. In other words, in so many words, what they're saying here is the United States is depleting its own stockpiles. We don't have the means to defend ourselves that we would like in the event that we are in open conflict with these countries, places like Russia and China. And we need to get to the point that we can be secure. And the reason for that is because we're sending a tremendous amount, as we have been for some time, of weaponry to Ukraine. One other piece here, they say Ukraine's blowing through it at record rates and has been. The New York Times reports this week that the Biden administration is kind of ticked off with the Ukrainian war effort because they say they've put all their men and all of the resources in the wrong spots in the country. And they're not waging the war correctly. This is what they say. Anyway, more details ahead with Dr. Kevin Roberts as he says, no, okay, enough. No more money. We need some explanation as to what the end state is in this war. But first, let's talk about tonight's conflict on that debate stage in Milwaukee. Republican candidates squaring off against one another. You don't have Donald Trump on stage. The top two candidates, Vivek Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis. You also have Mike Pence and Nikki Haley and Tim Scott. Others, Chris Christie, Doug Burgum, going down the list. For more on this, I want to turn to Daniel Turner. He's the founder and executive director of Power of the Future, and he joins us now. Daniel, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Vince.
I've heard from some of the candidates, maybe all of them, that the way to get the economic engine of the United States back up and running again is to stimulate American energy. It seems like this will be an important part of tonight's debate.
I'd like to think so, and I'd love to see the debate moderators ask some really concrete and specific questions. And I understand debates are made for a TV audience. They're made to get sound bites. They're made to be, quite frankly, good TV. And energy policy isn't always exciting. It shouldn't be exciting, right? It should be kind of perfunctory and basic. But I'd love to hear concrete questions about, here's one, the just transition to renewables. Do we even need it? Yes or no? Like, go on the record. Do you really think we have to get away from fossil fuels? And there are several candidates on that stage who I think are going to hem and haw and say, yes, look, Vince, I think we can all agree that climate change is, what is it? Is it an existential threat? Is it the greatest military threat? These are really important questions that are causing a lot of economic hardship to our nation and a lot of global instability. I'd love to have concrete answers.
And by the way, warmer temperatures, it turns out, have been kind of a benefit to us. If nobody wants to say that out loud, or very few do, more people survive in warmer temperatures. We've had fewer meaningful damaging hurricanes in these warmer temperatures. That has been a net benefit to us. It'd be interesting to hear if somebody says that on stage.
It would be interesting to see if someone lauds the fossil fuel industry at all, or what you just were talking about right before you had me on. Let's go back to the war in Ukraine.
Yes.
We all saw the photos of Zelensky with Greta Thunberg. I would argue that Greta Thunberg's green agenda has driven up the price of oil and gas worldwide as we're transitioning to renewables. We're not drilling more in America. Biden is proud that we're not drilling more, so there's less supply, so the price is higher. Well, Russia has taken advantage of that higher price. They sell as much oil and gas, right? We're boycotting it. The West is boycotting it, but they are selling as much oil and gas as they did a year and a half ago to Brazil, to China, to India. And what are they doing with all the surplus money?
Yes.
They're building an army. So here's a concrete question. Do you think the way to end the war in Ukraine is not to invite Greta Thunberg, but to increase American fossil fuel production and stop and lower the price of oil and gas worldwide?
Here's a key thing. Look, if you're interested in stopping the war in Ukraine and stopping the bloodshed, one way to do that without killing other people is just to increase the amount of energy production we have in the United States. It's an obvious thing. And I would actually put a question out. It's kind of rhetorical because you can't really assess the numbers right away. But how many lives would be saved if we increased oil production in the United States? It seems like that would obviously occur.
It's Reagan-esque. We win the enemy against we win the war against our enemies by bankrupting them. And if they have no money, they have the army, they have no infrastructure. Their people begin to rise up and in anger and in frustration. The Russian ruble is higher now than it was a year and change ago. The Russian stock market is higher now than it was a year ago. The Russian economy is doing better now than it was a year ago.
And they're accelerating de-dollarization around the world. They are diminishing the number of countries who rely on the American dollar as their reserve currency. That's the effect of all of this. And it's not so in other words, it's not good for us. There's nothing there is no panacea in American politics. There's no one policy that will fix everything. But boy, stimulating more American energy production seems like it'll actually send us in the right direction on a bunch of issues. Economics, certainly, the well-being of the average middle-class American family, and foreign policy, more American security. What could be wrong with this?
Exactly, and that's why I do believe that embracing the green agenda is the slippery slope towards socialism. As soon as you start to say, well, look, we all can understand that rising sea level, as soon as you head down that path, you start opening up yourself to the environmental left. And the environmental left has a nefarious and thoroughly un-American agenda. So I want to see what candidates hold firm.
Are you hearing anything from any of these candidates like that? Or any of these guys, to your knowledge, being like hilarious squishes on this subject?
Oh, absolutely. Asa Hutchinson is a squish on this subject. I don't think he's on the stage tonight. I don't think he qualified, but the mayor of Miami is a squish
Francis
on this
Suarez,
subject.
who also didn't make it to the debate stage tonight. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, they're afraid of angering the left. They're afraid. They don't want to look like they're radicals or extreme. So they will throw the great American energy industry under the bus, trying to appease the left. But you know what? Appease me for a change, damn it. Right? Appease the 18 million men and women who work in oil and gas. Appease the hundreds of millions of Americans who are struggling to pay their utility bills and say, I don't want to pay $4 for eggs anymore. I don't want to pay $4.25 a gallon for gas anymore. And we will get rid of all of that if we produce more energy domestically. Does anyone ever try to win our vote?
Yes. Yeah, no, it's a great point. So let me I've pulled up some of the candidate positions here as described by the New York Times. They did a wrap on this subject. Climate change and the Republican candidates. Let me start with Chris Christie. He's on that debate stage tonight. They quote him here. Quote, when you have over 90% of the world's scientists who have studied this, stating that climate change is occurring and that humans play a contributing role, it's time to defer to the experts, says Chris Christie.
Wow.
What do you make of that?
Next thing you know, Vince, will be standing in little 6-foot circles wearing our masks and sitting down at the restaurant to eat and take your mask off. Because that's what the experts told us, right? That is the slippery slope. Once you believe in the pseudoscience and the experts, shameful. Absolutely shameful.
Yeah, Mike Pence has acknowledged that climate change is happening. I don't think anybody disputes this. But he claims that radical environmentalists are exaggerating its effects and rejects as the New York Times puts it, scientific consensus that the United States must reach net zero emissions by 2050, calling that completely unfeasible. So Mike Pence sounds like he's got the correct position here.
Yeah, absolutely. Climate change is happening. I woke up this morning in Shenandoah, and it was 55 degrees. 3 weeks ago, we were talking about extreme heats all in this area, and the radical left was telling us we were all boiling to death. Remember the head of the United Nations called it global boiling?
Yes.
Well, where did all that go? The climate changed, as it always does.
Yeah, I love this time of year, by the way, just as an aside. Nikki Haley supports carbon capture technology, but has denounced efforts to reduce emissions. She says climate change is real. It's caused by humans, but she has generally rejected government efforts to reduce emissions. She has an advocacy group called Stand for America that says liberal ideas would cost trillions and destroy our economy. This is kind of a classic Nikki Haley assessment of things, which is she sort of wants it every single way. She's got a little something for everybody in there, doesn't she?
Yeah, and that's the problem I have when you start saying this is a problem caused by humans. When humanity becomes the enemy, then humanity becomes the target, and that's what we do. And that's why we talk about European-style pricing. That's why we talk about limiting people's diets, limiting people's mobility, things that they were very happy to talk about during COVID. So that's a really frightening proposition when you say that humans, not Nazis, right? Not communists, humans writ large are the problem. Holy cow, that sounds like a call for population control.
Yeah, it's amazing. Vivek Ramaswamy opposes all government efforts to reduce carbon emissions. He says fossil fuels are essential to human flourishing. Yeah. He's got that right.
Amen, brother. They've made life better for all of us. And all of those people on the debate stage flew there in privately chartered planes. They're going to get in their caravan of SUVs after the event. Fossil fuels empower their entire campaign.
I know. You blow through these small budgets with your private plane flights. It's insane. That's crazy. Tim Scott acknowledges climate change, but he rejects most efforts to stop it. Senator Tim Scott has acknowledged climate change is occurring. He once told the Post and Courier in South Carolina, there is, quote, there is no doubt that man is having an impact on our environment. There is no doubt about that. I am not living under a rock. He says Daniel Turner, Tim Scott does not live under a rock.
Well, I guess I do live under a rock because why can't you just have the guts to stand up and say this is a radical belief system that is neo-Marxist in its nature and it's neo-pagan and it is an absolute threat to American way of life. So again, we're playing the slippery slope towards socialism, acknowledging it just enough to not offend people. But that means then when push comes to shove, Vince, all of those folks will turn their back on this industry.
Yeah, DeSantis says that all of this climate change concern is just a pretext for, quote, left-wing stuff. I've always rejected the politicization of the weather. He says he wants to unleash our domestic energy sector and reverse the Biden administration's effort to promote electric vehicles. We are tying one arm behind our economy's back, he says, by prioritizing the left's ideological agenda. Crushing regulations and endless permitting requirements is what his plan calls for.
I think that is absolutely spot on as well. So we'll give him a very good score for his remarks. Do you remember back in 2020, and this is really 2019, because COVID hadn't really happened, when we were having the initial Democrat debates and they were talking about climate? And I remember as clear as a bell when Eric Yang said climate change is already happening. We need to start moving people towards higher ground, right? Kamala Harris said we have to talk about regulations of our diet. Should we go after your cheeseburgers? And she said we have to have a conversation about that, right? Yeah. So who's the radicals here?
I know.
Who believe in fossil fuels, or them who are absolute insane?
Yeah, they are. But also they know better, too, because even though Andrew Yang said it's time to move to higher ground, Barack Obama didn't change his address in Martha's Vineyard or Kailua, Hawaii. that never actually occurred. And then finally, on the list of these Republican candidates today, Donald Trump, who is not on the debate stage tonight. He will be appearing in some counter-programming with Tucker Carlson. The New York Times describes his position this way. It is hilarious. His actions as president may have caused irreversible damage to the global climate. Donald J. Trump has mocked climate science and championed the production of fossil fuels, chiefly responsible for warming the planet. Wow, what certainty they have. Chiefly responsible for warming the planet, they say. Mr. Trump has given no indication that his approach would be different in a second term.
Brilliant. That's the best response of all of them, because that's exactly the God's honest truth, right? This is a control agenda, and the best proof that this is a control agenda is that it follows the same playbook as they did in COVID. What they did wrong in COVID is that they did it too hard, too fast, and too narrow of a time frame. It was only a year and a half. But the idea that you have to scare people, that you have to censor what they can read and write and say about this issue, that you get to exempt certain people, Nancy Pelosi can get her hair cut during COVID, and John Kerry can have his private jet during a climate emergency, right? It's the exact same playbook. They did it in COVID in a year and a half. The climate people have been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah, COVID was the test run. The climate is the big tyranny exercise to come. And Republican candidates on that stage tonight have to have their eyes wide open. Not just the ones on the stage, Donald Trump, too, on that very subject. Daniel Turner, thank you as always from Power of the Future. Good to talk to you today, sir. The mugshots now coming out of Georgia as the left places its political opponents under arrest. We'll keep tracking that story about what's happening in our country. Also, Dr. Kevin Roberts is with us next. We'll talk Ukraine and more American money headed there, or maybe not.